Okay, thank you everyone for joining. This will be part 2 of our BacLink webinars. We did part 1 at the beginning of October. That webinar is available on the WHONET website. I will show you where that is. And before the end of this week, part 2 will also be up on the WHONET website. So we'll cover 4 topics today. A brief review of the previous webinar, especially for people who were not able to join the last time. Customizing the list of data fields. Getting started with WHONET, and then a brief introduction to the WHONET Automation Tool. We won't spend a lot of time on it, but we do plan to have a full webinar on the WHONET Automation Tool, either for the next webinar or for the one after that. The next webinar might be in collaboration with FAO about the FAO Inform platform. About 2 years ago, we did one on WHO Glass, so now it is time to also do a webinar for FAO Inform. So I'll start off with a brief review of BacLink. Before getting started, feel free to ask questions into the chat box. The slides will be made available, as well as other relevant materials. So I'll start off with a review of the October webinar. So what is WHONET? WHONET is a free software widely used around the world. We estimate in about 130, 140 countries, developed for the management and analysis of microbiology laboratory data to support local, national, regional, and global activities to understand and fight infectious diseases with a special focus on antimicrobial resistance. WHONET is a desktop application developed for Microsoft Windows. Many people do run WHONET very successfully on Mac, Apple computers, using either a Windows partition, a Windows virtual machine, or Windows emulation software. So if you do have a Mac, WHONET should run very well, but you do need to basically install a kind of Windows into your Mac. So that's WHONET for data entry, data analysis, and data sharing, public health reporting. But what is BacLink? Well, the situation is that laboratories all over the world have diverse computer systems that serve important functions for day-to-day laboratory, clinical reporting, medical archives, and billing operations. However, these systems are incompatible. Different languages, different hardware, different software, different codes, different data structures. So they're not directly compatible, and most lab information systems do not have abilities for doing data analysis or public health reporting. Or if they do have capabilities, they're often very rudimentary, such as antibiograms, which are important. We did have a webinar on antibiograms back in June, and that, of course, is also on the WHONET website. So labs around the world have different computer systems that might be in something like a Vitek or a Meditech, SunQuest, these different LISs, or other machines like Phoenix and MicroScan, SensiTiter. So that's an obstacle because each of these systems are different, but it's an opportunity. Staff have taken the time and effort to computerize their laboratory results on a daily basis. So if we can find a way to extract data from these different incompatible systems into compatible systems, we have the basis of a low-cost, sustainable, real-time system for surveillance, alerts, and action. And that's the purpose of BacLink, to transform data exported from diverse information systems into standardized WHONET files for purposes of analysis, sharing, and public health reporting. You see this illustrated at the bottom. You have a variety of different systems at the bottom left, incompatible local systems. And then through the use of the BacLink software, you can create standard WHONET files. Once the data are in WHONET, then you can analyze and share those data. So BacLink is basically the translation tool to get data from different systems into WHONET. In the last webinar, I compared BacLink to the website Google Translate. You might have documents in English and French and Russian and Chinese, but you want to have it in a language that you understand. That's what Google Translate does. BacLink does the same kind of thing. You have data in Phoenix and MicroScan and Vitek and Meditech and LabBook and SEDRI-LIMS and SILAB. Those are diverse systems, and the purpose of BacLink is to get the data into standard WHONET files for purposes of standardized utilization. In the last webinar, we talked about the 5 crucial steps for running BacLink. The most important step doesn't involve BacLink. The most important initial step is to get your data. get the data out of your system, either an Excel file or a text file. Go to your lab information system or your lab instrument and click on the export button if there is one, or work with your IT system to develop this kind of export. Step 2, open your file in Excel or some other similar software and just take a look. Are all of the results there? Are the antibiotics there? Is the organism there? Are the dates there? Male, female, animal species? Sometimes people say, John, why is the age and the gender missing from WHONET? And we go back to the original files, and they're not in the original files. So BacLink can only translate information that is there. So that's why step number 2 is simply open your file in Excel or other similar software, and just make sure that the content that you want is in the file. Secondly, make sure the data structure is reasonable. We usually look for simple rows with simple columns. If the data are incomplete, if you see mistakes, if you would like to add more information, you go back to your IT people and say, can you please add the following data elements? Step number 3 is where finally we get started with BacLink. You open the BacLink software and you start configuration. You tell BacLink, I have a text file, I have an Excel file, I have a Phoenix file, I have a SILAB file. SILAB is a commonly used laboratory information system for animal health. That's step number 3, is tell BacLink exactly what you are trying to import. Step 4, now that you've done that, do the import. You only need to do the configuration once. You get some data from your system. You tell BacLink the answer to these questions. Do the antibiotics go horizontally? Do the antibiotics go vertically? Where's the date? Where's the organism? Is it CLSI? Is it UCAST? Is it disk diffusion? Is it MIC? You do that configuration once. Then after you do that configuration, then you can convert the data. You can convert the data on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis. We also have the automation aspect where you could do it automatic daily or automatic weekly, and I will talk about that briefly. Many people say, John, I love WHONET. It's a great software. It saves me so much time. And I ask them, well, what do you use it for? And they say, we use it for our annual antibiogram or our WHO glass reporting. And I say, that's great, but you're only using the software once a year. There's so much additional value if you can acquire and look at the data on a daily, weekly, monthly basis for outbreak detection, quality improvement, recognition of new threats in real time. I don't want to know there's an outbreak a year later. I don't want to know that there were vancomycin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which is usually a laboratory mistake, a year later. I'd like to know something closer to real time, closer to action, for purposes of quality improvement, resistance containment, and interventions. And then step number 5, you finish with BacLink, you're ready to get started with WHONET, and what are the steps to do that? Those are the 5 required steps. We do encourage you to think about automation, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and you can do different automations. You can do a daily automation for outbreak detection and quality assurance for unusual laboratory results. You might want to do a weekly report for the infection control team. You might want to do a quarterly report for the pharmacy so we can support this kind of automation. Not a requirement, but it is a useful feature. And we have an increasing number of laboratories using WHONET in this automatic way. Data export happens automatically, if possible. That's not in our control. That's a function of your system. BacLink runs automatically. WHONET runs automatically. And WHONET can email or save files to various locations. So the next part of this webinar is I'm going to simply review some of the demonstration I did last time. When you import data with BacLink, you have basically fixed data. Like whenever you go to a Vitek 2 and you export the data, all over the world, the data structure is the same. You do not have the ability to edit the structure of the Vitek 2 export. So that's a fixed structure. Every Vitek 2 in the world will always export the data with the same structure. On the other hand, you have generic or configurable exports in which you have BacLink, you need to tell BacLink more information. I don't need to tell BacLink where the Vitek organism is. I don't need to tell BacLink where the patient ID is or the data is. BacLink knows that. It's fixed. But if I just create my own Excel file, BacLink doesn't know where to find this information. So step one, we will discuss how to export data from a Vitek machine, and I did not show that last time. I talked about it, but I did not show it. Step two, look at your data file. As I mentioned, what are the contents? Is everything there? Are the positives there? Are the negatives there? DISC, MICE test. If you're working with Vitek, that really it's valuable for you to do that, but it's not essential because BacLink already knows the answers. It's good for you to know the answers, but BacLink already knows the answers. So we will do step two, but whenever you have a fixed data import, it's less important. There is value, but it's less important. But if you have an Excel file, a text file, then yes, it becomes very important to understand how the data are stored and organized. We will then see how to go to BacLink, choose Vitek. If needed, you can update the date formats. I said that all Vitek exports are the same, except for small details like the date format. Here in the United States, we use month, day, year. Most of the world use day, month, year. Sometimes people use the hyphen, dash. Other times they use the slash. That's not a function of the Vitek. That's the function of the local computer. So step three, configuration. Step four, convert your data file manually once a week, once a month, once a quarter, once a year, and then get started with WHONET. So this is the same slide as the previous one, but more specific for Vitek. Step six, automation. Unfortunately, Vitek does not support automated schedule exports. So if you're working with the Vitek 2, you have to walk to the machine and manually export the data periodically. There are other versions of Vitek like Maestria, Mila, and some of them could have the ability to do automated exports, but not the Vitek 2. Similarly, Vitek 2, you cannot configure the export, but some of the other Viteks, like Vitek Maestria, the latest version, you can configure the exports. Okay, so I'm going to leave my PowerPoint for a little bit. I'm going to open, so here, after you install WHONET package, you'll see two icons, the WHONET icon and the BacLink icon. And it's not two different downloads. You download WHONET and both softwares get installed automatically. So we will later end up with WHONET, but we start off with BacLink, and I will open that now. And then I'll just do some delete. I was just doing some testing. Delete, delete, delete. So when you start BacLink the first time, this is what you see. The top of the screen, well, in Google Translate, the left of the screen is the original language. The original language might be Chinese or Dutch or Russian or Spanish or Portuguese. The right, and you choose the language of the import. You also choose the language of the export. I have the data in French. I want to convert the data to Spanish. I choose both languages. In WHONET, you only choose the input language. So I would like to import Excel, or I would like to import Sensitider, etc. So the same thing in BacLink. The information about the local file is at the top half of the screen, and the new WHONET file information is at the bottom of the screen. And we export to SQLite files. I'll talk a little bit about SQLite later, but it's a nice, modern, fast, efficient data management format. Okay. If I want to, I can go to select language, and I say it's English. I said, no, let me just put that to Spanish, Serbian, and let me put Spanish. Now that I said Spanish here, the software is now in Spanish. So it's not a different version of BacLink. It's the same version, but it does support multiple languages. Many of these languages were done manually, carefully reviewed and checked. But most of the languages, we ran them through Amazon Web Services translation, which is similar to Google Translate. And sometimes the translations are not great. They're good. So it does translate well, but sometimes you will notice a strange translation. For example, the word table in English has a few meanings. I'm sitting here at a table. But then I have a I have a data table. So in different languages, they don't always use the same word. In French, table is, well, that's table. That's not a good example. But in Spanish, mesa means a physical table, but una tabla means more of a graphic, a data table. So if you do see strange translations, just tell us, and then we can go ahead and improve the translations over time. For the most common languages, we try to get people to manually review the translations. I will change this back to English. Okay, so here at the top, I choose the language that I want to translate, but the box is currently empty. Before I get started on that, let me just make sure there's nothing in the chat. And Adam, if you, as you know, if you can just periodically monitor the chat, you can answer the question directly, of course. If it's somewhat important, I'll answer it later. If it's immediately important, just interrupt me and then I can answer the question in the moment. I just took a quick look. I didn't see anything, but I really didn't read very carefully. But feel free to ask questions in the chat box. So here's a list of the languages that BacLink understands, but the list is currently empty. So the first step I need to do is click on New Format. This was a big part of our Part 1 webinar. I'm simply reviewing the last webinar. If you missed the last webinar, some of this is a bit confusing for you. You might want to go back to listen to the last webinar and then listen to this one again. New format. BacLink has a few simple questions to get started. What country are you in? I'm going to say United States. There it is. And let me call this BacLink webinar. Sure. BacLink webinar 2. I'll call this BW2. You give it the full name of the laboratory, of the institution. The laboratory, and for the laboratory name, I mean the name of the institution. I don't mean microbiology laboratory. They're all microbiology laboratories. So put the name of your institution. That is most commonly a human hospital institution, but it might be an animal health or a reference lab or research or an academic laboratory. So put the name of the institution where the laboratory is saved. And we usually write that out full so we know the full name. And then we give it a short code. The short code can be 1 character up to 10 characters. 3 and 4 characters is the most common. BWH is my hospital, Brigham and Women's Hospital. UCLA is 4 letters, UCLA. So that's part 1, country, laboratory name, laboratory code. Then we have 2 buttons here, file structure and codes and dates. And again, I think of this like a language. When you have studied languages, you study 2 main things. You have studied grammar and you've studied vocabulary. That's the same thing with data files. The grammar is the structure. How do we organize a sentence and how do we organize the data, the rows and the columns? And when you study a language, you study vocabulary. How do you say blood? How do you say urine? How do you say penicillin in this other language? And that's the same with the WHONET data files. You might call it sangre, which is Spanish for blood. And in WHONET, we call it blood. We also call it sangre if you translate this into Spanish. So we will focus on the file structure, and then we will come back to the codes and the dates. So I'll start off by the file structure. First question, what is the file structure? Is it a simple delimited text file? Is it an Excel file? Is it MicroScan? And there are 2 variations. Sensitizer, we have recently, for many of you who do use bioMérieux products, we have recently added in Vitek Kernmik, that's widely used in Latin America, Maestria, the new system global, Mila, Observa, Real, which is again a Latin American version, and the Vitek 2. Alice is from Uganda. AsiarsNet is from Japan. BLIS came from Atlanta, Georgia, but it's used in a number of African countries. Cerner Millennium is a commercial lab information system. FAO and some of these other lab information systems at the bottom. SILAB Excel, which has been there for a long time, and SILAB Text is their new export. I just realized I did forget 2 steps. I jumped immediately to BacLink, and I did not mean to do that. Let me click on OK. Let me click on Exit. I'm not going to save this. So if you missed it the first time, I'll do it again. I told you that starting BacLink is step number 3. I forgot to show you step numbers 1 and 2. Step number 1 is, how do I get my Vitek file? Where does the Vitek file come from? And we give you the instructions on how to get data out of a Vitek in WHONET. It's on the WHONET website. It's also here. I'll show it both ways. Here, if I go to the C drive and I click on WHONET, double click on WHONET, there's a folder here called Documents. When I go to Documents, you see all the BacLink manuals at the top, including Vitek 1, including Vitek 2, including BD Epicenter and the Phoenix, including MicroScan. And then you have the WHONET tutorials. Let's see, there's one here for SILAB. Yeah, here it is. There's one at the top for SILAB, for animal health laboratories. We do not yet distribute that because we're still trying to refine some of the final details. Once it's finalized, we will also put that on the WHONET website. So if I go to Vitek 2, how do I get the data out of the Vitek 2? When you open this document, you find the screens. So anybody familiar with the Vitek 2 knows this computer screen. This is for data entry and configuration and statistics. And here in the lower right-hand corner is the toolbox. Inside the toolbox, you see an option called Export Inactive Isolates. So Vitek is primarily used on a day-to-day basis for doing the tests, but once in a while, you can export the inactive isolates through clicking this button. If you do not see this button, discuss it with your vendor. Sometimes it's not installed. Sometimes it's not installed for a regular lab technologist, but it is for the supervisor. So if you do not see it there, you can get it. Just discuss it with your representatives. I'm showing you right now how to get the data out of a Vitek 2. We have similar instructions for MicroScan, Phoenix, SensiTiter, SILAB, Meditech, Cerner. I'm just showing you right now the steps specifically for Vitek. When you click on Export Inactive Isolates, you end up with this screen. There are a lot of features, but we really only use the testing date, start date, end date. I want to export all of the January data, all of the 2025 data. There are a couple of other features, MIC interpretation, but we just leave it on MIC. Here at the bottom, include export. No, we don't need that. We just usually leave this turned off. It gives additional descriptive information at the top of the export file, which is not needed. So we just come to the screen, we put a start date, we put an end date. And here in the upper right-hand corner, you see a picture of a CD. That's the export button. So you click on that export button, and BacLink will tell you, I found 11 isolates. Do you want to continue with the export? Yes, I do. I type in the name of the new file that I would like to create. I can call it my January data, my 2025 data. After you give it a file name, you click on Save, and then it will say at the bottom, Export Started and Export Finished. Here it says Export Finished 100%. Then you can save the data onto a CD or a USB or onto the hard drive. And that's the end of this tutorial. The rest of this tutorial does continue with BacLink, but there's no need to go through that here. We're going to go through that separately. So I showed you the steps on how to get the data out of the Vitek. For many commercial systems and common LISs, we can give you those instructions. Other times, we can't give you the instructions. You have to talk to your IT people. How do I get the data out? And they might just do it for you. Or maybe it's on a menu and they'll tell you how to get the data out. I cannot tell you how to get the data out of your LIS unless if it's an LIS that I know. If it's not an LIS that we know, just discuss it with your IT people. And they will show you how to do it, or they will export it for you from the back end. Okay? So that's step number 1, getting your Vitek file. Now that I have the Vitek file, where is it? That's step 2. I go to WHONET, I go to Data, and here you see a file that we give to everybody for teaching purposes, called the Vitek Do demo file. We have another one for Excel. I'm going to delete some junk here that you don't need. Good. For teaching WHONET, we use these last 2 files. The first file, 2020-01, that is 1 month of human health data that we use for teaching human audiences, human-oriented laboratories. The second one, called One Health, has 400 isolates, 100 animal, 100 food, 100 human, 100 human, animal, food, environmental samples. So that's for teaching WHONET. I won't talk about those today. Today, I will talk about the Vitek example, a little bit about the Excel example, and then the SILAB example to give an example of a larger true data file. This Excel file only has 10 records I manually typed in, so this would be a more interesting example. So Vitek 2. I opened that file, and this is what a Vitek 2 file looks like. It's the same all over the world, the exact same data structure. The only difference is that the heading might be in a different language. The heading, they don't support, in the export, they support French, Spanish, Portuguese, a few others. So the structure is the same, but the heading might be in the local language. And then here you see the record number 1, record number 2, record number 3. For example, I can see here, they don't call it Staphylococcus hominis, they call it Staph hominis. Mary Jones is the patient. The location is 5 North. This is a blood. You see here the MIC values. It's a little bit hard to read here in Notepad, but it is a text file. In text file, I can use Notepad. But what I will often do is I can do Control A to select the entire data file, Control C to copy it, and then I can open Excel. And I'm going to create a new file, and I'm doing paste here. The data are still a little bit hard to read because the data are not separated to columns. I'm going to click on Data, separate the text into columns, delimited. Next, there's a comma. You see John Smith, comma, blood, comma, date, comma. So there are commas here. I'll do next, finish. Just makes that a little bit better. So this is what the Vitek file really looks like. It's a text file. BacLink understands this file very well. There's no need to go to Excel. I'm just going to Excel to show you it just looks better in Excel. But BacLink works with the text file. Here in Excel, these are nice, clean data. By that, I mean there's one row, there's one column for the different organisms and the different data elements. John Smith is not a real name. I just typed those in as a demonstration. ICU, 5 North, cardiology. So you are now looking at Vitek data with a Vitek data structure. You see the testing data is always filled in because the Vitek does know when the test was done. The collection data is sometimes missing because people have to type that in. And if they don't type it in, then Vitek doesn't know when the sample was done. Here on the right, you see the ciprofloxacin MIC, ceftazidime MIC. So basically what you see here are appropriate Vitek data with the Vitek organization and the Vitek codes. The purpose of BacLink is to take these same data, reformat it, restructure it, recode it, so that it's Vitek data, but with WHONET structure and WHONET codes. That's our goal, is we eventually want to see these same data inside of WHONET, not inside of Excel. I'm going to make a small point here. This isolate, this row here, row number 6, has all of the antibiotics for this isolate. One row equals one isolate with all of its antibiotics. That is a very common way to organize the data, especially if you manually enter the data into Excel. One row equals one isolate with all of the antibiotics. Many data exports don't do that. They don't do one row per isolate. They do one row per antibiotic. So there will be one row for ampicillin, one row for penicillin, one row for ciprofloxacin. They're both fine. BacLink has no trouble with the horizontal or the vertical. We just need to tell BacLink which one we have. So the Vitek 2, the antibiotics are organized horizontally. I'm going to leave Excel. I did not need to do this step, but I just wanted to give you some idea of what a Vitek file usually looks like. So step number 1, I acquired this file. Step number 2, I looked at it. Now I am ready for BacLink. I open BacLink. I manually deleted some files, so it's actually putting them back in right now. Okay, good. File format, just like before, I click on New Format. Country, I will put United States. Laboratory code, I will call this BacLink webinar part 2. And for a code, I'll just call it BW2. File structure, and this is where I ended last time. So it's a little review of what we chatted about earlier. The file structure can be text, Excel, SILAB, Inform, but this file that I showed you is a Vitek 2 or a Vitek file. The two software share the same structure. So I'm going to choose Vitek 2. I'm going to click on OK. Oh, I didn't have to click on OK yet. I chose Vitek 2. The delimiter is a comma. It can be a comma or a semicolon. That depends on your Vitek, and that if you need to change it, you can change it. You can see CLSI, which is often the case. So WHONET BacLink says, oh, Vitek, I know Vitek. There is one row of data for each isolate. We just discussed that. The antibiotics are in a fixed sequence. There is one column, a separate column for each antibiotic. A Vitek 2 export only has MIC data. In contrast, Vitek Observa and some of the others can do disk and MIC, but Vitek 2 only does MIC. And there is only one method. It's all MIC. It's not disk. It's not e-test. It's all MIC. So BacLink says, thank you for telling me you have a Vitek file. I know what I need to know. There's one thing, though, which is not always correct. It's not always CLSI. So if I click here on antibiotics, normally this box, the screen is filled with many, many questions. Is it disk MIC? Are the antibiotics horizontal? Are the antibiotics vertical? BacLink is not showing you those questions because BacLink already knows the answer. But BacLink does allow you to choose between CLSI and UCAST. And for Vitek, those are the only relevant options. Or CASFM, the French method. We do want to put in also the Brazilian method. It's BurCast. It's similar to UCAST. Some systems have multiple. They might do, especially in animal laboratories, they'll do some antibiotics by UCAST, but they'll do CLSI for other antibiotics because of the availability of breakpoints. There's multiple guidelines as a new feature that we introduced this year. I'll say the two most common answers would be CLSI and UCAST. I don't have to answer these other questions because BacLink already knows the answer. Good. Bottom of the screen. I don't have to look at the bottom of the screen because, again, BacLink knows the answers. I'll show it to you just so you see what it is, but I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to show it to you. Data fields. Define the relationship between your data fields and the WHONET data fields. I click on data fields, and you can see what WHONET calls identification number, Vitek calls patient ID. What WHONET calls full name, Vitek calls patient name. What WHONET calls sex, what WHONET calls age, Vitek calls the same thing. What WHONET calls location, Vitek calls a patient location. WHONET calls it organism, Vitek calls it organism name. So I don't have to do anything here. BacLink already knows the answer, so I'm going to click on OK to leave that screen. I'm going to click on OK. I'm going to click on Save. BacLink will now save this information into a configuration file so that you don't have to repeat this every month. Once you save it, it's saved forever. So click on Save. BacLink is suggesting, let's call this BacLink webinar number 2, Vitek. Good enough. I'm happy with that. Save. You can change it. You can give it a different name. You can change the location. Right now, by default, it's going into the C drive onto the WHONET folder, but you could put it somewhere else if you would like on the network drive. So save that. Changes saved successfully. Exit. And now Vitek appears on this screen. So for something like Vitek or SILAB or any of these fixed proprietary systems, it's extremely easy. All I did is I went to New Format. I entered the country and the laboratory details. I went to File Structure. I chose Vitek. I chose SILAB. I chose whatever. And then I just leave. I can change CLSI to UCAST if needed. Otherwise, I just click on OK and I save it. I'm not going to do it again. I just did it. Save changes, no. So if it's one of these fixed systems, configuration is extremely simple. On the other hand, if it's Excel, you've got more work to do. BacLink doesn't know where to find the organism and the dates and the gender. So we will come back to that in a little bit. So field file name, so that's the language I want. BacLink Webinar 2 Vitek data. The file name, well, I have to click on Browse, and it's the Vitek file here. Open. And BacLink is suggesting a new name. The new name is basically the same as the old name, Vitek 2 demo data, except it puts in the country code USA and the laboratory code BW2 before. That's useful for the National Data Manager because the National Data Manager ends up with all these files called January. But which laboratory is it? So we put the code of the laboratory into the file name. Also, it starts as a text file, but it's going to end as an SQLite file. So it's like in Google Translate, I choose the original information at the top, and I put the new information at the bottom, the new file name with WHONET structure. I'm now going to begin the conversion. BacLink is going to show me the first 3 isolates, just so I know there are no mistakes. The WHONET field name is on the left. The local Vitek value is in the middle. We just copy, ICU, specimen date, blood. Here at the bottom is the Vitek bio number. Most people do not pay attention to that. I like the bio number. It does give valuable information for outbreak investigation. If there's an outbreak, the strains usually have the same or a similar bio number. So most people ignore it, but I do find there's value in that. And we have done a publication on using bio numbers to help improve outbreak detection. If you Google, if you go to PubMed and search for WHONET Vitek, in fact, if you just look for, so if you look for Stelling Vitek, you can find the article. Or if you look for Stelling antimicrobial resistance, Stelling SAT-scan, you can find some of our relevant publications. If there's time, I'll do that PubMed search for you. And here at the bottom are the antibiotics. So the first thing that you see is for very little work, BacLink understands the data structure very well. Okay. Adam, I noticed one small thing. It does not understand the word neg, so we can fix that and we can predefine what the word neg means. Oh, no, I take that back. It's just this little minus sign. I didn't even notice the minus sign here. So it converted, it just copied over the bio number. It split the name into first and last name. The location it copied and pasted. There's the specimen number. There is a problem with the specimen date. As you can see, the date format is year, month, day. And BacLink says, I don't understand what that means. And we'll fix that. We can fix that easily. Because BacLink supports many different date formats. It just has to be the correct one. The antibiotics understood very well. So we don't have to do a lot of this because we have incorporated the Vitek organism list and the Vitek antibiotic list into BacLink. We've done the same for MicroScan, Phoenix, Sensititer, and the others, wherever we know what the list is. You see, for example, Staph hemolyticus twice. Local organism code, we just copied over. Vitek calls it Staph hemolyticus, we just copied over Staph hemolyticus. We don't like losing information if not needed. But we also copy it here to SHL. That's the WHONET code. So we retain the original code so that you can always look at it. It's the most granular, it's the most accurate, it's the most precise. But where possible, we try to match it to the closest WHONET code, and that's what you see here. Same thing for blood. They call it blood, so we copy that over. But we also try to convert it into the WHONET code, and the WHONET code is BL for blood. Okay. I'm going to go to, that's isolate number 1. Everything looks good except for the date. So I'm going to come back and fix the date in a little while. In fact, there are 2 dates here. This is the specimen date, and here is the test date. And the test date is also not understood by BacLink. That's isolate 1. Next. Isolate 2. 5 north becomes 5 north. The date it doesn't understand. Blood is fine. Staph hominis, it copies over. The WHONET code is SHO. Pos from Vitek is converted to plus in WHONET. So it's consistent. Beta-lactamase positive, MRSA positive. We use the plus sign. and the antibiotics. So overall, it looks good, except for the date. That's isolate 2. Isolate 3 looks good. It's now 3 south. The date, it doesn't understand. And staph hemolyticus again. That's isolate number 3. I click on next, and BacLink runs through the rest of the file. And because I was talking so much, that took around 4 minutes. There were 28 records in that Vitek file. I would like to continue. We'll do a view database later. Continue. And BacLink says, I didn't understand everything. I didn't understand, and I'll come to that. Do you want to review the new codes? I will say no. I don't want to review them right now. I want to fix the date. So I'm going to fix the date first. Do you want to review the new codes? Not yet. I'll say no. How do I fix the date format? I click on Edit Format. You already saw a file structure. Now I can go to Codes and Dates. And you can see that specimen date is set to month, day, year. But this isn't month, day, year with the slash symbol. It is year hyphen month or dash hyphen day. I'll put that the same for specimen date and for date of birth. So I fixed 2 of the dates. There's one more date. The additional date is the testing date. The Vitek testing date does not appear on the screen. At the bottom, it says modify the list of data fields. I'm going to click on that now. Modify the list of testing fields. We're going to come back and spend a lot of time on the screen later. Right now, I just want to scroll down to the bottom. And here you see those special Vitek fields like testing date. Testing date is also sent to month, day, year. And I just want to type year hyphen month hyphen day. And I say OK. I say OK. I say save. And I say OK. I say exit. And now I'm going to convert the file a second time. Well, the WHONET Vitek file already exists. Do I want to replace it? Yes, because the dates were wrong the first time I did this. Do you want to replace it? Yes, I do. And now you can see the dates are correct because I matched up the date format correctly. The specimen date is there. The testing date is there. Unfortunately, the birth date is not there for Vitek 2. It was just never something they thought about 25 years ago when they were making on it. All the later versions of Vitek include the date of birth or the age, but the original Vitek 2 does not include the gender or the date of birth or the age. So we fixed the dates. That's isolate 1, isolate 2, isolate 3, next. Because I spoke less, it only took 46 seconds. Let me do continue. I get that question again. BacLink did not understand all of the codes in your file. Do you want to review the new codes? Yes, I do. BacLink did not understand the locations. It did not understand the specimen, some of the specimen types. BacLink understood all of the organisms, all of the antibiotics, because we have put in more or less the complete list from Vitek. If there are new organisms, if there are new antibiotics, it will tell you, and then you can define it proactively. Because over the years, of course, there will be new organisms, new antibiotics. Periodically, we will update our dictionaries, but you can update it yourself because they will show up on the screen. I'm going to click here. It's important for WHONET to know the WHONET specimen code, the WHONET organism code, and the WHONET antibiotic results. It's not so important for it to know the locations because we just use your codes. There is a value to it, so we will come back to that. But I'd like to start off with these 2, the specimen type. You can see here, it does not ask me for the word blood. It does not ask for urine. It does not ask for sputum because BacLink understood those automatically. BacLink will only ask you if it doesn't understand what the word means. So I'm going to click here on specimen type, define codes. And there are 2 codes it did not understand. Sputum sample, it did not understand. Catheterized urine, it did not understand. So I click on the first one. Also, I can do a search. If the list is much longer, I can look for urine and all variations on the word urine, and you can define them all at the same time. If I put swab, you can define all the swabs at the same time, but I'll just do one at a time. Sputum sample, define code, so I can define them one at a time. And BacLink is trying to be helpful. Sputum sample, does that mean sputum? Yes, it does. Does it mean sputum for acid-fast bacilli? No, it doesn't. Does it mean induced sputum? No. So BacLink is trying to be helpful. because BacLink doesn't understand sputum sample. BacLink understands sputum. So I just have to click this once to say that's a match. Okay. The next one, catheterized urine, and it disappeared from the list. Catheterized urine defined code. Here's a little tricky, and BacLink is trying to help, and it says catheterized urine. Is that the same as urine non-catheterized? No, in fact, it's the opposite. It's confused by the word catheterized, because catheterized, that's a very good match. So this is not a good match. How do I improve the match? I'm going to remove the word catheterized from the search. Catheter is a better match, urine from catheter. So BacLink will try to show you the best match, but BacLink is just looking at the letters. So catheterized was a better match, but it was an incorrect match. It was a better match alphabetically, but scientifically, catheter urine is a better match. So I just changed the search box. For example, we don't have like finger. If you search for finger, WHONET doesn't have finger. If you look for hand, it does have hand. So sometimes you have to play around. If I just remove everything here, it shows you the full list, including food, animal, and human specimen types. Okay, we go back and do the urine. Urine catheter, that's a good match. I click on OK. And then everything here is now matching. The list of unrecognized specimen types is empty. Now I want to view the code dictionary. View code dictionary. These last two, you saw me do those just now. Vitek calls it sputum sample, WHONET calls it sputum. Vitek calls it catheterized urine, WHONET calls it urine from catheter. BacLink did not ask me blood, urine, wound, throat, stool, because we use the same words. It's an identical match. So in that case, BacLink just does it automatically. Same thing, E. coli, same thing, ciprofloxacin. If BacLink understands it, it's not going to ask you something it already knows the answer. Here on the left, you see the two-letter code in English. BL is blood, UR is urine, WD is wound. But that does depend on the language. If I were doing this in Spanish, the WHONET code in French is SA for sang. In Spanish, it's SA for sangre. In German, it's BL for Blut. So the codes do depend on the language. Fortunately, this does not lead to corruption. If you have some data from English and some from Chinese and some from Russian and some from Greek, WHONET doesn't look at the letter codes. WHONET uses this number. So 12 is always blood. It doesn't matter what language of WHONET you're using. Urine is 11. Throat is 2. So don't worry about mixing languages because WHONET uses this number to make sure that the language does not corrupt the data. We don't have to do that with penicillin. Penicillin is the same in more or less every language. Penicillin, penicillina, penicillin, but it's still PEN. Same thing, E. coli is always E. coli. So ECO is a reasonable code. I'm showing you the dictionary, and this is useful if you made a mistake. So, oh no, if you match urine to catheterized urine, that would be a mistake. If you do find a mistake, find the mistake and either delete it and then just do the conversion a second time and then choose the correct answer the second time. Or click on edit, and then you can make the correction right here. So again, just trying to, and then I can search for the correct match. So am I going to click on exit here? So you don't need to look at the view code dictionary, but it's nice to know what BacLink is doing. It's saying this becomes this becomes this. And if you have mistakes, then you want to look at the code dictionary to fix the mistake. All of the specimen types it now understands, and I click on OK. Location, there's a different reason to find location. I'm going to click on Define Codes. And here it says outpatient. I'm going to start with 5 North to give you a better sense of the value of defining the locations. I'm just repeating myself from the first webinar, but this is so important that I just want to spend this time to make sure people really do understand, BacLink, the basic BacLink knowledge before I go on to those other newer features, which are the rest of this webinar. 5 North, they call it 5 North. I'm going to click on Define Code. 5 North, you call it 5 North. We're going to call it 5 North as well. There's no reason to change the code, unless if you want to change the spelling or something else. But I can say that this is the Department of Medicine, and I can say that this is an inpatient. So that's not needed, but it is valuable. It is what we call meta information. It's descriptive information. For example, the infection control team wants to know the exact room. It's 5 North. But the pharmacy doesn't really care about exactly which room it is. They want to know, is it inpatient or outpatient? They want to know if it's ICU or not ICU, which is a special kind of inpatient. So this is allowing us to define each location with inpatient, outpatient medicine, surgery. That's useful within the hospital for the pharmacy. The pharmacy doesn't really want to know, they don't want to make an antibiogram for 5 North. They might want to make an antibiogram for the ICU, but besides the ICU, usually they just want to group all the inpatients together. It's also very useful at the national level. At the national level, they don't care about 5 North. They don't know what 5 North is, but they do care, and WHO Glass cares, is this inpatient or outpatient? On the veterinary side, FAO, this is what we call the location type. The location type are human things, but also animal things like farm, veterinary clinic, restaurant, slaughterhouse. So this is the kind of location, very valuable at the national and international level to have some degree of standardization. So for this 5 North, let me just call that either inpatient or inpatient non-ICU to be a bit more specific. That's up to you. Okay. 5 North medicine inpatient, great. I'll do the same for oncology. Department, I will call that hematology oncology. And again, I will call that inpatient. Let me jump down to 3 South. Define code, let me call this surgery, inpatient. Okay. Let me go to outpatient. In fact, that's what we call it in WHONET as well. That's why I didn't want to start with this. They call it outpatient, we call it outpatient. We're going to call this Department of Outpatient. Location type outpatient. So in fact, it just says outpatient 3 times. Okay. ICU. I'm going to go to ICU, and that's a special department, is the intensive care unit. Location type is also intensive care unit, so I just put the same thing 3 times. There's the medical ICU, the surgical ICU, the pediatric ICU, the neonatal ICU, and burn units. Burn units are usually considered a kind of ICU. Okay. So I do not have to do this, but it does allow me to put that valuable information, inpatient, outpatient especially. And if you do want to standardize medicine, surgery, farm, clinic, then it's useful to be more comprehensive. I'm going to click on View Code Dictionary. And it's just simply what you saw me do. The codes are on the left, but the descriptive columns are on the right, medicine, inpatient. And if you made a mistake, you can just you just click on Edit or Edit Table or Delete, and then just make the edits here. I'm going to click on OK. I'm going to click on OK. I defined all the specimen types, but I did not define all the locations. I have 10 that have not been defined yet. I won't do that now. And continue. BacLink is saying you have to find some new codes. If you want to include these codes in the data file, you have to do it again because the first time it did not understand sputum sample. So I'm going to click on OK, and I'm going to convert the file a second time. Begin conversion. The file already exists. You want to replace it? Yes, because each time it's going to get smarter. Yes. And here I can see ICU, ICU, ICU. So it actually took the location and used that to populate the department and location type. That's isolate number 1. Isolate number 2, 5 North, that's medicine inpatient. So I hope you do not have to define your locations, but I hope you appreciate the value to introduce standardization at the local and national level. I click on Next to get isolate number 3, surgery inpatient. Also catheterized urine, sputum sample, all those codes have now been defined. And it remembers for next month. If I go to February, March, April, I don't have to redefine these. I only have to define the new ones. Next. It finished. It took less than a minute because I was talking. Now we're going to start to do some new things. Click on View Database. And this allows you to see what you have been doing. I showed you the Vitek file in Notepad. I showed you the Vitek in Excel. And it was Vitek data with Vitek codes and Vitek structure. Now you are looking at the Vitek data, but with WHONET field names and WHONET codes. So for example, here, it says sputum sample, and it says SP plus the number 3. So it has both the local code and the WHONET code. If I move over to organism, I see the Vitek organism code, like ASCII Baumani, and the WHONET code ABA. If I go to the right, I see my antibiotic results, and it uses the WHONET code. Vitek calls it ciprofloxacin, but we call it CIP in WHONET. If I go over to the location for 5 North, it says here medicine inpatient. It says surgery inpatient. It says cardiology, but I have not defined cardiology. So you see the holes in here because I haven't finished defining it. I see the specimen date is sometimes missing because it was not in the original data file. I can see the testing date and the bio numbers over here. Those are special Vitek fields. That I probably showed in the last webinar. What I didn't show is find and replace. So for example, maybe there's a mistake. Oh, sorry. And, maybe I just want to, maybe there's a typing mistake. I can do find and replace. And maybe I want to change. I can click on replace. And I can say cardiology. I don't know what I want to call it. I'll call this cardiology ward to make sure that it's clear the difference between cardiology clinic and cardiology ward. And I just want to do that in the location column. And I can do replace all. There was only one record. I replace all again. Do you want to continue? Yes. And I'm going to cancel. And here you see it doesn't say cardiology. It says cardiology ward. So this is a new feature from this year. In the past, BacLink would allow you to see fields, see the data, but to do no editing. So that can be valuable. We'll talk about this later, but sometimes you do need to edit or correct or fix the files. And you can either fix the original Excel or the original Vitek file. You do it before you get to BacLink. You can fix it in BacLink, or you can fix it in WHONET later, or using a software called DB Browser for SQLite. So there's not one, you can fix the data here in the original data, you can fix the data in BacLink, you can fix the data in WHONET, you can fix the data in this other software called DB Browser. I'll talk about that later. The ability to edit inside of BacLink is a new feature. I'm going to close that. BacLink did not understand all of the codes in your file. Do you want to review the new codes? Yes, I do. And as you can see, we can just continue from where we left off. The specimens, organisms, antibiotics, it understands, but not these other locations, define codes. And then I can continue to do them one at a time until the list is empty. I'm going to show you another feature right now that we did not discuss last time. Is for these locations, I could define them one at a time, pediatrics, neurology, burn unit, but there is a faster way, especially if it's a lot of codes. Here is a feature called Add All Codes to the Dictionary. Do you want to save all the codes to the dictionary automatically? You can define them later if you would like. And I'm going to say yes. They've disappeared. They are now all in the dictionary. How do I know they're in the dictionary? Well, the list disappeared. And now when I click on View Code Dictionary, they're now here. So they just got copied in, but it left the 2 columns empty because I had to define those manually. But they're here in the dictionary. And sometimes it's just faster. Instead of doing them one at a time, I'm going to click on Edit Table. And what is this? This one is pediatrics. I'm looking at the left. Pediatrics, the WHONET code is PEDS. Well, let me start in the last column. That one's easier. This one, let me make this column a little bit narrower so I can see everything at once. Oh, Adam, I just can't seem to adjust the field width. So let's just make this editable so I can adjust the field width. Okay. So, so we're going to call this inpatient. I'm going to copy that. Burn unit is cardiac surgery, inpatient, cardiology, inpatient. Labor and delivery, inpatient, neurology, inpatient, neurosurgery, inpatient. Pediatrics, if it's the pediatric clinic, that's inpatient. I'm going to put outpatient, maybe it's the clinic. Plastic surgery, I'll put inpatient. Burn unit, I will call that ICU. Emergency room is EME. Those are the WHONET codes. I can do this because I know the codes. I made the codes. So, and the easy codes you can learn yourself quickly. In, out, ICU, emergency. Those are the four most common. Or use that INX, inpatient but night ICU. If you don't know the code, that's fine too. Click on edit. Let's see, I'll do this for cardiac surgery. If I click on edit, then I can say department surgery, inpatient. So if you don't know the code, do them one at a time. If you do know the code, then just type it into the table. So that's new from last time. You can edit these dictionaries one at a time, or you can just load it into the table and just edit them here. If you look at the top of the screen, it says code dictionary, code dict, location, BW2, that's the laboratory code.txt. This is a simple tab delimited text file, so I don't actually have to edit this file inside of BacLink. I can edit this file in Excel or Access or some other software. So I didn't talk about that last time. If you have very long location dictionaries, if you just want to kind of get a sense of the mappings and the organisms, sometimes I do this one at a time in BacLink. Sometimes I edit the table in BacLink like I am doing now, or sometimes I just put it into Excel. One of the most common reasons I do it, the two most common reasons I do it in Excel is for locations, because it might be a very long list of locations, and I just want to say inpatient, inpatient, inpatient. It's just faster to do in Excel. I can do filters, I can do search, I can do a lot of things in Excel. That's one reason I do this in Excel. Microsoft gets paid more than we do, so Excel has a lot of features, of course, that WHONET doesn't have. The other reason I would use Excel a lot of times is if people do free text, they'll type Staphylococcus aureus 5 different ways or 10 different ways. S. aureus, Staphylococcus aureus, with a space, with a period, Staph aureus, but they misspelled aureus. So sometimes it's just a pain in the neck. They have so many different ways to spell things. It's just sometimes easier to do the mapping in Excel. Or I already showed you in BacLink, you can do many at the same time. If I search for aureus, I can define all the different aureus at the same time. So I'm going to click on exit out of here. Do you want to save the changes? Yes, I do. Save changes, yes. Okay. Okay, continue. Now everything has been matched. This screen is now empty. Continue. Let me convert it one final time. The file exists. Do you want to replace it? Yes, I do. Next, 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 because I'm happy. I know there's no problem with it. Continue. It is done. It did not say anything unmatched. Everything matched perfectly. Then I'm ready to go to WHONET. I'm not going to do that right now, but this is a review of what we did last time. I spent a lot of time on it, but it's so important that I thought it was important, in part because last time some of it was a bit rushed, I felt. Okay, good. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. I did that in detail. And I already mentioned for the automation, you cannot do automation with the Vitek 2. It just doesn't have a button for scheduling. SILAB. I'm going to come back to this in a little while, but it is a review of what we did last time. That's why I don't want to lose more time on it now. I'll show you how to do a SILAB example. I'll show you how to do SILAB. Go to SILAB, export your data. We have the instructions. We have the screen grabs. What screen? You go to epidemiology, you go to report, you go to Excel, you go to export or text. You put the start date, the end date. Look, just like Vitek, but the screens are different. Examine the content. Again, it's not so important because BacLink understands it, but it's good for you to know what's in your file. And then choose either SILAB CSV. We're going to change that to SILAB text once we finalize this, and SILAB Excel. Once we finalize it, we'll put the document onto the website. And then use SILAB the same way we did the Vitek. There are really no differences, except it's going to be a lot of animal details. And then get started with WHONET. The developers of SILAB are at an animal health institute in Italy, in Teramo, IZS, Zooprophylactic Institute of Investigations in Teramo. And we would like to do automation we'd like to do it for you. So if they can set it up, then you should be able to get automatic WHONET files every day, every week. And this is currently happening now live in Kenya. So we have a pilot project Once the Kenya one is optimized, then we will go to some of the other countries in Africa to also get them set up for some daily reports, some weekly, and some monthly reports. And then I want to go back and review a little bit about Excel, and we'll do this as part of this demonstration. I won't do it right now, though. But why is this important? In Vitek, we know BacLink knows the column headings. But if you have Excel file, BacLink doesn't know. You might have a field, here's my example. In your Excel file, you might have a field called birth date. But in WHONET, it's not called birth date, it's called date of birth. So I have to match it up manually. Or you might have a field in Spanish called fecha de nacimiento, which means birth date. So we do this mapping to make sure that the fields align. Not necessary for SILAB, not necessary for Vitek, because BacLink knows the answers. But if you have a generic text file, a generic Excel file, then yes, you do need to do that mapping. We did it on the last call, and we'll come back and do a little bit more of it on this webinar. And then, yes, you can also hopefully usually do automation. We can help you automate BacLink and WHONET and email notifications with the WHONET Automation Tool. We'll talk about a little bit about it at the end and on a separate webinar. We cannot export from your system. I don't know your system. We don't have the passwords. We don't have the security access. But your IT people hopefully know how to schedule an export. In my own hospital, it's automatic daily. Other places, they do weekly or monthly. Good. Now we're moving to completely, we did a little bit of new, and now we're doing everything new. So customizing the list of data fields to optimize them a bit. We did not discuss this last time. Defining fixed values, adding, removing, or customizing fields, creating and editing dictionaries. We already saw a little bit about editing dictionaries. I showed you that with the location dictionary. And combining data fields, and I'll talk about what that means. What do I mean about fixed values? Well, I realized very early is somebody would send me a data file, and the name of it, where's my example here? The name of the file, if you look in the middle of the screen, would be like E. coli in blood from chickens. Very descriptive. The file name tells me which organism, tells me which specimen type, tells me which year, tells me which animal. So sometimes the file name is very descriptive. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it'll just say project data. But then when you open the file itself doesn't say E. coli. The file doesn't say chickens. The file doesn't say blood, because there's no need for it. If the whole file is chicken, you don't need to put a column that simply says the word chicken. So that's what we call a fixed value. Okay, so this feature is very useful when all of the records have the same value. If it's all blood or all strep pneumonia or all diseased aquatic animals, this is relevant for FAO Infarm, but the information is not stored in the file. Because if it's all of its blood, you don't need to tell the file it's blood, it's all blood. So it's basically missing data. From the file name, I know it's blood. From the project description, I know it's blood. But the data doesn't know that it's blood, and WHONET doesn't know that it's blood. Example in these kinds of special projects where the information might be variable. Because all of the records have the same value, they might not create a column for it. So instead, normally when we match the field on the left, like date of birth, to the field of right, like birth date. But here we're going to match it to a fixed value. So now I'm going to go back to BacLink and show you a little bit of an Excel example. I'm going to go to new format. Oh, yeah, good. So BacLink, we were finished with the BacLink one for Vitek. In fact, I should have written the word Vitek to be more descriptive. I'm going to do a new format, and this one here, we're going to call this United States. Let me call this BacLink webinar. It's not very advanced. It's just a little bit advanced features. So let me call this BWAF. You call it whatever you want. File structure. So I'm going to show you an Excel file, Microsoft Excel. Here in the middle, it says no answer. It doesn't know if it's Vitek. It doesn't know if it's MIC. It doesn't know if it's UCAS. It doesn't know anything. So if I say Excel, I do need to answer some more questions like antibiotics. Does your file have antibiotic results? If I say no, easy, no more questions. Because some people do use BacLink for like malaria or for viruses or even for pharmacy. So you can trick BacLink to doing other things besides antibiotic resistance. But of course, in almost all cases, or they might study C. difficile. Clostridium difficile is a very important organism, but we don't usually do susceptibility testing. Are there antibiotic results? Yes. CLSI, UCAST, or mixed. Do the antibiotics go horizontally or vertically? The file I'm about to show you, they're vertical. There's one antibiotic for each row. The antibiotics are in a variable sequence. If it's an E. coli, it has certain antibiotics in a certain order. If it's Staph aureus, it has a different set of antibiotics in a different order. The file that I'm going to show you has DISC and MIC and e-test results. On any, even though the file has a mixture of DISC and MIC, the file I'm going to show you, each row is either DISC or MIC. There's only one method per row. I'm going to click on OK. We discussed some of that on the last webinar. That's not what I want to focus on right now. I want to move to these other new features. Okay, so now in the middle, I have answered all of the questions. Now at the bottom, define the relationship between your data fields and the WHONET data fields. With BacLink, with Vitek, it already knew the answers because we put them here in Boston. But here it says, no, BacLink doesn't know. So I'm going to say select a sample data file. I'm going to open up I'll open up this particular demo database. And I need to do some mapping here. The one on it's actually an animal health database. So in fact, there is no first name, there is no last name. There is an identification number. I'm not even sure where the identification number is. Where's the identification number? Submitter, look, submission number. Okay, good. So that's equals sex. There it is. It has the same field name. Equals location. I'm not gonna do all of these. Sampling point number 10. Mission date not relevant. Specimen number. It's in there somewhere. Sample identification equals. So we did this in the last webinar, but you just need to match everything on the left to something not everything. Everything on the left and right that you are finding interesting, match those up. Here, a column called disease might often be empty. If it's empty, you don't need to capture it. Or something like testing section microbiology. That's not interesting for analysis because it's all microbiology. That was important for the export. We only exported microbiology data. So on the left, match everything that you want to match, and then you can just ignore the other things. Okay. Organism, I'm just doing a few of the most important ones. I call it organism. They call it organism, Staph epidermidis. Antibiotic test method, they call it method, just diffusion. Antibiotic name, they call it antibiotic, equals. Antibiotic result, and I have the choice between putting the measurement or the interpretation. I'm going to put the measurement. BacLink does have a limitation. You can take the measurement or the interpretation. There is a way where you can capture, where it can look at both of them. It can look at the measurement and the interpretation. If there is a measurement, it will save the measurement. If there's no measurement, it will save the interpretation. If that's relevant for you, let us know and we can tell you how to do that. It's a feature, I don't use it often, but I use it sometimes. It's not on the screen, it's someplace else. So I've just done the basic configuration of the most important things, but I want to show you the feature I discussed about fixed. For example, okay, I'm going to specimen type. Specimen type is, well, that's not a good example. Let me go to the next one. Subculture, that's not a very interesting specimen type. Or maybe there's a better field for it. Subculture bacteria is not the original specimen type. Okay, I was looking at the wrong field. It's called liver. It's called the original material. That's the true answer. But So normally what I would do for this particular database, I would say specimen type, original material equal. Okay. But I'm going to do something different. I'm going to say the specimen type fixed value is blood equals. So on the left, you see specimen type equals blood. That means it's telling BacLink all of these are blood. Just save them blood. Don't look at a field. Don't look at any of the values. It's the word blood. Okay. I typed the word blood properly. You don't have to. I could put BLUD. BacLink will ask me later. If BacLink recognizes the word blood, it's not going to ask me. If I just put like BL or B, BacLink will ask me later what that actually means. I'm going to type it correctly. It just saves me one step later. Or I can go to organism. I can go to organism, and I can say they're all Streptococcus pneumonia. Good. So I'll do that. I'll go down here, fixed value, and I'll just put S pneumonia. And I'll say equals. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to say save. I'm going to say save again. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to say exit. And then I want to choose my example file. And I want to begin the conversion. It shows me the first three. I only did a partial configuration. Sampling point is 10. The specimen number, SW, it's not a very interesting specimen number. Blood, it's all blood. Strep pneumonia, it says, well, I know what blood means. It's BL and WHONET. S pneumonia, I don't know what that means, and BacLink leaves it empty. Next. Again, it's blood, and again, it's S pneumonia. Next, it's blood, and then it's S pneumonia. It rushes through the rest of the file. Continue. BacLink did not understand all of your codes. Do you want to review the new codes? Yes. And organisms, S pneumonia. BacLink says define codes. BacLink says, I don't know what S pneumonia means. Define code. Is that Streptococcus pneumonia? Yes, it is. I say OK. I say OK. Disk diffusion. What does disk diffusion mean? Define codes. Define code. It means disk diffusion. BacLink's not smart enough to recognize that. OK. I'm not going to do, well, I will do maybe 2 or 3 antibiotics. This is a small sample data file. It's not real data. Amoxiclav. That's amoxiclav, and I choose the correct disk potency. 20 micrograms and 10 micrograms, okay. Gentamicin, CLSI is a 10 microgram disc. Trimethoprim sulfa, CLSI is that. And tetracycline. It's having trouble understanding this, so I just type tetracycline, good, CLSI, okay. View code dictionary, and I'm not doing anything new. This is the same as what I showed you earlier. I showed you for specimen, for location. I didn't show you for organisms and antibiotics because it understood all of them. But I'm just showing you now, if it's Vitek, BacLink understands the organisms and antibiotics. If it's Excel, no, every Excel file is going to be different. Exit. Okay. Continue. You define some new codes. And now when I begin the conversion, replace yes, it now says these are Streptococcus pneumonia. And I have my 4 antibiotics. These are also Streptococcus pneumonia. These are also Streptococcus pneumonia. So that's the end of this slide. That is the feature called fixed values, and it's very valuable when everything has the same value. If all of your data are E. coli, it might not be in the file, but you still need to tell WHONET what it is. Okay, next screen. Adding, removing, and customizing fields. That's what we will look at now. Go back to BacLink. Let me close out and cancel. Save changes, no. Discard. Do you want to review the new codes? No. So I'm going to BacLink Webinar Advanced Features, Edit Format. There are 2 ways. There's a screen called Modify the List of Data Fields. I'll show you 2 ways to access that screen. Number 1, the most common way. I go to File Structure, Data Fields. Here at the bottom, Modify the List of Data Fields. This is the screen we want to get to. You can get to the same screen here, Codes and Dates. At the bottom, it says Modify the List of Data Fields. and you end up with that same screen. It's a little bit faster, but either way is fine. It gets you onto the same screen. And now we can spend some time discussing things that you can and cannot change. Country is a 3-letter code. You cannot change that because it's a fixed code. We use the ISO 3166-1 list. Laboratory, by default, it's 10. It's usually 3 or 4, but we give you 10 characters. But some people, they download in its full text, Brigham and Women's Hospital. So that's not long enough. Just put 50 or whatever you want. Same thing, last name. By default, we put 30. But in China, the last names are very short. So you might just put something like 2 characters or 4 characters. In Spanish, sometimes the last names are very long. Maria Teresa Gonzalez Rodriguez de Fatima. So the names can be very long. So you can, WHONET, we give you a default 30 characters. You can make it shorter, not usually needed, but you can make it shorter. Or you can make it longer if needed, so things don't get cut off. So for example, if you see that you have a long location that gets cut off, just come back here and make it longer. Just give it more space. Okay, sex, 1 character, you can't change that. Name, you can change it. Location, by default, is 10. But when you download data, a lot of times it's not a code. 10 is reasonable for a code, like 5N for 5 North. But if you are downloading cardiology clinic, that is more than 10 characters, and I don't want it to get cut off, just go ahead and change it to 30 or 50 or however long you need. Okay. For things like WHONET organism codes, you can't change that. It's a 3-letter code. Otherwise, you would confuse WHONET. But for other things, you just put what you want. So it's one kind of customization. Okay. Here it says country. We want to export that to the new file, but we don't want to show it to you in the field list. Why? Because you know what country you're in. I'm going to check here. Display. So let's take a look at the previous screen. Oh, actually, let me go to the other one. I want to show you the other way. File structure, data fields. This is the screen I'm talking about. Identification number is the first row here. Modify the list of data fields. If I click on country, display in the field list. Laboratory, display in the field list. Okay. And now you can see them here. They were always there, but they were invisible. And they use that same feature I mentioned called fixed values. The country is USA. I don't need to see that. It's always USA. So I can hide it. And that's what the purpose of this is. Country, it's going to be exported. But normally I don't want to see it because it's just not interesting. It's always the same value. I'm going to do my conversion again. Begin conversion. And USA and BWAF, they were always in the export, but they were not visible on this screen. So you can control which are visible and which are not visible. Okay, good. It's a small thing, but it's helpful. And I want to discard that. Save changes, no. Edit format, file structure, data fields, and modify the list of data fields. So these are small things I can change. What else can I do? I can move things around. For example, I might add things at the bottom, and then I want to move them up, and then I want to move them down. So maybe I want all of my location fields together, my animal fields, my patient fields. So you can use move up and move down to move things around on the screen. So here you see last name, first name, and full name. And normally what we do is we export the last name and we display the last name in the field list, the same with the first name. But many of you, your LIS doesn't export the first and last name separately. You do the full name. So instead of having John and Smith in 2 different columns, there's one field. So as you can see, first, the full name does appear here so that you can do the mapping. But normally with full name, we don't export it. We break it up into first and last name. But then it can get confused. John Smith, it is very simple. John is the first name, Smith is the last name. But if somebody's name is, John Smith Brown, where does the first name start and where does the last name end or start? So what I can do in that case is I do want to export the full name to the output file, and I do want to display it. In that case, I don't want to export the first name. I don't want to export the last name. In fact, I don't even want to see them to avoid confusion. So now that I've done that, you can see full name is still here, but first and last name have disappeared. So if your data file has first and last name separately, great, just use first and last name. If you have them as a single field, you can just capture the full name. That's another small feature. Good. More importantly, we can modify the list. Modified list. For example, I'm working with an animal health database. I don't need to see the animal's first and last name. Animals, of course, do have a date of birth, obviously, but normally we don't track. We don't know the date of birth. Maybe the farmer knows the date of birth. Maybe the farmer doesn't know that. Like if it's a cow, hopefully they'll know the date of birth. If it's a chicken, they might not know the exact date of birth. So I've removed date of birth, not because it's not available, but because but not because it doesn't exist. It does exist, but we often don't know what it is. So this is how you remove fields. So I can remove fields, especially in the animal setting. The medical department is not relevant. The admission date is not relevant. So this is removing fields that you do not need. And you can make this a very, very short list. We want the organism, we want the date, we want the specimen type, we want the antibiotic results. If it's an animal, we would like the animal species. If it's a human, ideally, we would like the age or date of birth. We'd like the gender. So you can make this list as short as you want. You can also make it longer. For example, if I am working with animal health data, there's an option here at the bottom called veterinary. There's also an option called Vietnam Animal Health. In collaboration with the Vietnamese, they said, can you please create for us something with all of these fields that they use themselves? We've done that for NormVet, that's the Norwegian veterinary project. We've done that for some other veterinary projects. And then Ireland, these are human health questions. Was this a device-associated infection? Was the infection acquired in an ICU? The 30-day outcome, living, dead, transferred. So these are examples. So WHONET has standard fields that we give to everybody. Some of them are standard that appear automatically, and others are optional. These are optional fields that you have access to. So if I'm working with animal health data, I'm going to go, if I actually go to FAO Inform, FAO Inform has these three special fields: data year, and I use the arrow key here to select them. Or maybe I didn't select them. I don't know if I did select. Where are they? Oh, here they are. Data year, data representation, surveillance program. I'll talk about them a lot on the Inform webinar. But it's basically, are these healthy land animals, diseased land animals, aquatic, or is it food? These are special fields for FAO. So you can, anything on the left, you can choose over to the right. For example, if I go to clinical information in the top left, these are our categories. Clinical information, I can put the date of admission. Well, I already deleted it. I can put the date of discharge. I can put the name of the physician. I can put the clinical outcome. We don't usually do that because the laboratory usually does not know this information. But if you're in a research study, or if you want to add it later manually, this can be useful. It's often not practical routinely, but if you're in a special project, then you might want to do that. So you can choose from the list on the left. Or microbiology. If microbiology, you might want to put the gram stain. We don't usually use gram stain for analysis, but you might use it for clinical reporting. Gram stain. So these are adding fields. But you may want to add a field that WHONET does not have. So that's user defined. I click on user defined, I do select, and I don't know what I want to call this, PCR for AMP-C or something like that. Molecular test. PCR for AMP-C. In WHONET, we don't keep a long list of different genetic tests. So you can type it in. At the present time, you have the choice between a text field or a date field. We might add more options in the future. It's a 10-character field, but you can make it 1 character. You can make it 20 characters. I'll put 5. Probably just 1 is enough, positive, negative, but I'll leave it 5 characters. I will say OK. And here you see it at the bottom. So on the right is a list of standard WHONET fields that we gave to you, optional data fields that you have added yourself, and user-defined fields that you have done for your purposes. If you'd like to be up here on the left, data categories, just write to us. AMRIS is for Nigeria. ASM, we did that for Special American Society of Microbiology product. EARSnet, CSER, EARSVET is a new initiative. So we don't do this laboratory by laboratory, but if there's a project, a national program, we're happy to do that. Click on OK. And now that it's here, I click on OK. And now that it's here, I've added to the bottom. PCR for AMP-C, I can move that up to other similar questions. Gram stain, I can move that up to the organism area. Clinical outcome. Unfortunately, I can only do one. I can only choose one field at a time. Clinical outcome, let's put that up with the patient information. Somewhere in here. Okay. I click, so that's moving up, moving down. Okay. Okay. And now you see your clinical information. At the bottom, you see physician, data representation. And then you can say a fixed value. If these are all healthy terrestrial land animals, you can just put that. If these are all the same physician, well, they wouldn't be, but you can put that in. And then you can map it to the values on the left. So let me go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, adjust the sequence with sort, move up, move down. Field lengths, I showed you how to do that. Adjust field visibility and exportability. That's include an export list, include invisible list, and adding fields from the standard and the optional list or user defined that you created, and remove unneeded fields. So we have finished with this slide about making that list as short or as long as you want with the fields that you feel are valuable for epidemiology and statistics and analysis and reporting. Good. Next slide. Creating user-defined dictionaries. As mentioned in the previous slide, it is possible to create user-defined data fields. Look at the timer, okay? You can also define user-defined code lists of acceptable values, as well as user-defined code dictionaries to map local values. WHONET, we don't give you a list of physicians, obviously. We don't give you a list of diagnoses. We don't give you a list of states or provinces or counties. But you may want to make your own list. We did something like this for Colombia, where they were getting data from different labs, and they wanted to make sure everybody used the same codes for the provinces. So even though the different labs, like one would say Bogota, the name, and the other would say BO, the code. So we wanted to standardize that. So we did utilize this feature to take the codes from the original files to standardize them. And sometimes there's like mistakes. You might have one database where somebody types New York, somebody else puts NY, and somebody makes a typing mistake and puts New York. This is also a useful way to clean it up. As I said, when you're cleaning data, you can clean the original data in Excel, or you can do some cleaning in BacLink or some cleaning. So the more you clean the data, often it doesn't matter, or sometimes it makes more sense. The best kind of cleaning is cleaning you only have to do once. I don't like cleaning data in WHONET because every month I'm going to have to clean the data in WHONET again. If I can clean the original source data forever, then I don't have to repeat February, March, April. The data will be clean. Or in BacLink, if it's a code mapping, once the code mappings are correct, New York with an incorrect spelling, it will correct it during BacLink. So when I'm thinking of making edits, I try to make the edit in a way that will last forever. So I don't have to be fixing the files every month. Okay, how do I make these dictionaries? What's the next screen? And then how do I edit them? Okay, good. And so I'm going to go back to modify the list of data fields. And for example, here I created a field called clinical outcome close to the top. Clinical outcome. There's a field on the right called code list, and there is no code list yet. I can make a code list. And what are the outcomes? It says no code validation, the first option, meaning you just copy paste. Whatever you have it, WHONET will use the same thing. But I can also do a standardization. What are the potential outcomes? Might be died. For the code, I could use a one-letter code, or I can just put the full word, either's fine. Died, lived, or like 30-day outcome, died, lived, or alive, Transferred, you might not know, the patient was simply transferred. Or unknown. So you can make your own list, and you can put codes. You can put full text or codes, that's up to you. You can put the codes here on the table, or you can put them in a file. And we've done this a lot for Argentina. They have a list of diagnoses. They have a list of risk factors. They have a list of contributing comorbidities. And by having it in a file, they just update that file once a year. They send it to all the labs as an external file. That's useful, but I'm just going to do the table here, meaning it's only for this configuration. It's not for any other, it's for this configuration. I've made these 4 things here, okay? So I've made a code list. Now that I've made the code list, I'm going to select a sample data file. I do not have clinical outcome here, so it's not going to make scientific sense, but I'm going to say clinical outcome is, I'm going to say region 1. Well, let me put something else. Well, sure, I'll put it antibiogram passive surveillance. Passive surveillance usually refers, not always, passive surveillance usually refers to the diseased animals because this is normal daily operations. Whereas active surveillance is often like a project or something monthly or something required by regulation. So I'm going to say that clinical outcome is equal to that. Okay. Okay. Save. Okay. Exit. Begin conversion. And here you can see at the bottom, where it should be at the top actually, clinical outcome, antibiogram passive surveillance. I just copied it. And WHONET says, I don't know what that means. Isolate number 1, isolate number 2, isolate number 3. It's all active passive surveillance. Next. Continue. Do you want to review the new codes? Yes. Clinical outcome, define codes. It's only one value that field. It's a small database and they're all the same. Define code. And I can say, well, it's trying to match on the letter A. Let me just remove the search box. Antibiogram surveillance. I'm going to say, well, I'm going to say died. Say the animal died. Again, this is scientifically not the best example. This is meant for something else, but I'm hoping you see the value of it. Okay. I say okay. I say continue. I say okay. I begin conversion again. So you can see I made a code list with the valid values. And then I made a code dictionary to map to the valid values. Isolate number 1 died, isolate number 2 died, isolate number 3 died, and then it finishes the rest. Continue. Review the new codes. I'm not going to do that now. We've discussed that earlier. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. So we discussed this user-defined code list like I did for the diagnosis. Or the field, the clinical outcome was not a user-defined field. It's a WHONET standard optional field, but it doesn't have its own dictionary. We've just made a dictionary. Now that I've made a dictionary, how can I review and edit it? Okay. So it can be useful to review the dictionaries, to fix mistakes, to make sure it's complete, to edit it. By default, these are simple text-delimited text files, tab-delimited files. So you can review and edit these files inside of BacLink. I wrote WHONET, I meant BacLink. And I showed you that earlier. I edited the locations inside of BacLink. Or I can do it with Excel. So how do I do that in BacLink? I go to Edit Format. I go to Codes and Dates. And here at the bottom of the screen are the names of the 4 primary dictionaries. There's the location dictionary, the specimen dictionary, the organism dictionary, the antibiotic dictionary. If I go to the location dictionary, you've already seen this. I click on View Code Dictionary. Well, I showed you for the Vitek. I didn't do it for this particular example, but this has all of the location definitions. Organism, strep pneumonia, the one that I manually did, is here. So these are the 4 dictionaries that almost everybody has. Modify the list of data fields. clinical outcome has its own private dictionary in a table. And it has its code. So the code list, you saw me create that manually. Using that manual code list, BacLink has created a code dictionary saying, well, you call it antibiotic, make this wider. You call it antibiogram passive surveillance, but WHONET calls it DIED. So this is ongoing maintenance of your user lists. You can keep that here in a table specific for this BacLink configuration, or you can do it in a file like in Argentina, where they update the lists every year, and then they just have to send out the list to the other laboratories. They say, just save this list into this location, and then everybody gets the updated list. Okay. So that's a very valuable feature. For human hospital labs, often they don't make these changes. They're happy with the WHONET list, age, gender, first name, last name. And sometimes people do make changes, like gram stain, things like that. But for research labs, academic labs, or public health labs, veterinary labs, often they do want to take advantage of these features. They want to add in more fields. They want to do molecular studies. So for routine hospitals, these features I'm showing you are often not needed. Sometimes they are. But for non-human hospital labs, people very often use these kinds of features. You say OK here. Getting back to my PowerPoint. So that's reviewing and editing dictionaries. Combining, concatenating. I'm just looking ahead, getting started with WHONET, DB browser. And that's the end of it, I think. No, OK, good. I'm just looking at the time. Still have 15 minutes. OK, concatenation. OK. Combining data fields. I'm not going to show this for lack of time, but I will describe it, and it is on the slides. Until this year, BacLink users could match one field to one field. Organism equals organism, first name equals first name. But that sometimes was a problem. Sometimes we'd have a database where there'd be one column that said age and a different column that said age unit, like 5 months as 2 separate columns. And BacLink couldn't handle that as 2 separate columns. So what we used to do in the past is we would go to Excel, we'd do a little formula, and we would merge them into a single column so that in Excel, we would put them together to be 5 months. Okay. Same thing with dates. Usually dates in Excel, it's one column. But infrequently, I'll see an Excel file where there's one column for the month, a different column for the day, and a different column for the year. We have to combine those together. BacLink, it has to be one field. So before 2025, you had to combine these different fields together using Excel. In 2025, we did introduce a new feature allowing you to combine data fields together. As you can see, you can combine different fields together. You cannot do this on the screen. What you do is you go to the configuration file. It's in the WHONET folder, and you manually edit it. For example, this file called Vitek demo, Vitek config, open the file in Notepad, and you will see, let me just put this in normal mode. You'll see a row that says age equals age. If you change that to age equals age plus age units, WHONET will merge them together. And then you save it, and then you convert it. And then when you convert it, those 2 columns will be 1 column. And you can merge together 2 or 3 or 5 or fields. In Kenya, they were doing this to merge in the farm ID. They wanted a unique identifier. So they merged the farm ID with the animal ID, with the submission ID to try to get something unique. So this allows you to combine different fields in Excel into one, and you can take different fields in Excel and merge them together in Excel. But this new feature allows you to merge it in BacLink, and it's automatic. In Excel, you have to do it every month. Every time you have new data, you have to manually convert it, manually merge them. But in BacLink, you do the syntax every time, it'll do it automatically. I won't show it for lack of time. Next, getting started with WHONET. BacLink and WHONET do not talk to each other, so after you finish with BacLink, you still have to start some of the work in WHONET. And the first place to do is put WHONET on your list of labs. There are 2 ways to do this. You could go to WHONET and do new lab, the normal way to create a new lab in WHONET, but there's a much better way. There's a shortcut, and I'll show it to you now. Inside the WHONET data folder, today we have created this file called USA BW2 Vitek demo data. That is a WHONET version of this Vitek file. So we want to work with this file in WHONET. How do I do that? First of all, I leave BacLink and finish with BacLink for now. Exit. I go to WHONET. And I'm doing something with Pakistan to help them with their animal health to get their in-farm data ready. Pakistan, if you're on the call, I'll do it later today. It's on my high priority list of things to do. If I want to analyze the Vitek data, I could click on New Lab and start from the beginning, but there's a shortcut. I'm going to click on Cancel. I'm going to click on File, Create a Laboratory from a Data File. Let's take advantage of the work that we did with BacLink. Create a lab from a data file. I will just say it's United States again. I will say BacLink Webinar 2, BW2. I could put human. This is also a new feature. Before we had two options, human or human animal food environment. But that means that for the animal people, they never had the human. So we just separate into 4 separate questions. Okay, so that's up to you. So I'm going to put human because this is a Vitek human health database. Data files, I'm going to choose this file here. This file is a WHONET file that we did not make with WHONET. It's a WHONET file that we made with BacLink. Say OK. OK. And then I'm going to say OK. BacLink is asking, WHONET is asking me, do you want to create some drop-down list? Do you want a drop-down list with all of the bio numbers? Do you want a drop-down list with all the probabilities? And I'll say, sure, why not? I want my drop-down list. That might be helpful in analysis when you want to click on certain bio numbers. It gives you the drop-down list. I say, OK. It's doing some automatic analysis to automatically suggest some resistance profile definitions. Do you want to review the BacLink WHONET finished? It's now in. Do you want to review this? Yes, I do. But I won't show you this right now. Now, the next time I open WHONET, it's now on the list. So that's what I did, is using that feature, create a lab from a data file. It created this as a normal WHONET lab inside of WHONET. So I did not have to do new laboratory, start from the beginning, my antibiotic list, my breakpoints. It just took advantage of that file to copy that information into WHONET. Very valuable feature to finish BacLink and get started with WHONET immediately. Now I'll click on Modify Lab, where I was half a minute ago. And you see it automatically populated the top. It automatically on the right, these are all the antibiotics that it found in the Vitek file. These are all of the locations that it found in the Vitek file. These are all of the data fields it found in the Vitek file, including these special Vitek ones like bio number and probability. So previously, if you learn how to use WHONET, you do configuration, you start here. With BacLink, the end result is the same, but it just happened so quickly because it got the information it needed from the BacLink WHONET file itself. Save. Now that I'm there, I can go to data entry to open the data file, and here it is. I click on View Database. So here's all the Vitek data. I showed you the Vitek data in Vitek format in Excel. I showed you the Vitek data in WHONET format in BacLink. And now I'm showing you the Vitek data with WHONET format inside of WHONET, inside of the data entry module. Here we have options called Edit, Isolate, Edit Table, Delete, Find, Search, etc. That's one way you can visualize the database. You click here on View Database. Exit. You can also click on View Database here or View SQLite Database specifically. I'm going to choose that same file. And this is almost what I showed you inside of data entry. They're just unfortunate. They're small differences. This screen has Find and Replace. The other one doesn't. The other one has Print Clinical Report, but this one doesn't. So we did this a few years ago before at the beginning of the Fleming Fund, and we never finished it. So right now you have two ways to see this file inside of WHONET. Inside of the data entries program, that's the way, that's always been there, including print clinical report, but there's no search and replace feature. Or here, where there is search and replace, eventually we're going to merge the two functionalities together. It was just because we had other priorities. This was never a high priority feature, but it's something that we feel we do want to. The two things are almost the same, but we need the functionality to be identical before we delete one or the other. We need to merge them close. So why did I show you the files in Excel? Because that's part of validation. You've done backlink, you've done mapping. You want to make sure that you didn't make a mistake. Is the specimen date missing? Are the antibiotic results correct? Do you have strange MIC results? Is the gender missing? Or where the month of January, the date's incorrect or the date's missing? So that's one way of doing validation. Maybe just take like 5 random isolates or 10 random isolates. We had a project with the CDC where we had a larger number where we did a manual review against the original source data. So you want to validate it. You just don't want to trust that there was no mistakes. So one way to check there are no mistakes is to look at the data. Not every record, but a certain number just to verify that there's no big issue. That's one way to do validation. Another way to do validation is to do some quick analysis. I'd like to start with these first two here. If you haven't looked at WHONET in a while, we have separated these first two tabs. These used to be on one tab. We've now split it. These are screen and Excel reports. These are Word reports. I'm going to start with the patient and sample statistics. And I'm going to choose my data files. Also, in other features, in the past, you could choose the data files. I'll do that now. Okay. In the past, you could not choose a specific laboratory or a specific organism or a specific time period or one per patient. You can do that now. So if you are a national data manager and you have a big file for the whole country, you might want to do 1 or 2 or 3 labs at a time. So these filters are the same filters that appear in normal analysis, but they now appear in quick analysis so that you don't have to do a report on the entire file. You can do a report on a subset of the file. That's a new feature in WHONET. Data files. I've already selected my file. I want to output to the screen or to Excel. Let me do patient and sample statistics. Begin analysis. And I see all of the data are from June or one in May and January. Is that correct? So, well, what happened to the February, March, April data? Well, in my case, it's accurate because it's just I have a random stupid data file with a lot of random stuff in it. So, are any months missing? No, this looks good to me. This is laboratory by month. This one is laboratory by gender, sex, but this file does not have sex in it. This one is by age group, and the age is unknown. This one is by location. The most common location is outpatient, followed by 5 North. I can also see that in a graph. Outpatient is the most common. Next is location type. Most common is inpatient. I can see that in the graph. Continue. The most common specimen type is urine, followed by sputum. I can see that in a graph. Continue. And also, I'm making sure that the values make sense. If I see that the location is Staphylococcus aureus, it means I must have made a mistake in the mapping. If I see that the age is missing, and I know the age is supposed to be there, then there's some mistake and it's missing. It's either missing in the source data, or there's a mistake in backlink. So part of what I'm doing is epidemiology, but part of it is data validation. Is there something missing? Is there something incorrect? For example, if you see data for January 1st to January 12th, but you don't see data for January 13th until the end of the month, you might have confused the day and the month. So that the date format, it might not recognize the dates if the date's not correct. Continue. Good. I can do the same for the organisms. Begin analysis. This Vitek file has a lot of Acinetobacter. I can see that here. Continue. This is organism by month. So 6 of those Acinetobacter were in June. This is by gender, but we don't have that information. This is by age group, but we don't have that information here. This is by exact location. For example, Acinetobacter is in different locations. E. coli, I don't know about E. coli. Okay. Continue. We have the specimen, we have the location type, inpatient, outpatient, ICU. We have the specimen type, like blood and urine. And then we jump to the antibiotic statistics. This is the detailed report for Staph aureus. We see our MICs. Continue. We see the detailed report for E. coli. We see the gram-positive antibiogram. And we need at least 20 isolates. And in this small data file, there were not enough data. This is the gram-negative antibiogram, and we did not reach a minimum of 20 isolates. The CLSI recommendation is 30. We'd like to give 20. You can decide later. If it's 25 isolates of Salmonella typhi, I don't want to delete that. That's important information. If it's 20, and you might want to put a footnote that it's below 30, but it's still valuable information. If it's 25 Salmonella, Serratia odorifera, you might want to delete that in your antibiogram. People do make empiric therapy choices for Salmonella typhi. They don't make empiric therapy choices suspecting Serratia odorifera. So so by giving you 20, you can decide in Excel what you want to complete and what you want to delete. You can also do a Word report or these other reports, but that's a different webinar. We do have two webinars one webinar on quick analysis reports. Okay, let me go back to my PowerPoint. Taking a look at the time. Okay, getting started. We've done this. Getting started with WHONET. Yeah, we talked about validation. So the two things we didn't do are DB browser and backing up. I want to talk about backing up files because that's important. You should always have a strategy for backing up your files. You don't have to back up the WHONET software. You can just re-download the WHONET software. Your data files, back up your original text or Excel files. Your WHONET files, by default, they're in the WHONET data folder, but you can put them wherever you want. BacLink has configuration files ending in config. By default, they're in WHONET. Just copy and paste them to some other safe location. Network drive, another laptop, Google Drive. The dictionaries, those code dictionaries, I showed you examples. These are the four most common. And the WHONET lab configuration file, for example, labusa.bwh. Backup files to another computer, for example, to a network server, another laptop, a desktop, or a server. You can back up to USB, some flash drives or CD-ROMs, but it's not secure. They get lost, they get stolen, they get damaged. Don't put confidential, secure information into something that you're going to lose or that might get damaged and then you cannot recover it. Okay, little comments about automation. This will be the subject of a future webinar. You can schedule automated weekly, monthly, daily, using the automation tool. We can automate BacLink and WHONET in email notifications. We cannot automate the export from your system. Vitek 2 doesn't have that feature. SILAB is going to put that in. Meditech, Cerner, Sunquest, these commercial, all have the ability to automate it. So we will have a webinar about that. The last thing before questions, and if you have to leave, I understand you have to leave. There is you can look at WHONET uses SQLite files, as I mentioned. You can look at SQLite files inside of WHONET. Unfortunately, not inside of Access. There's a way to do it, but it's not an obvious way using something called ODBC. So you can use WHONET to look at your SQLite WHONET files, of course. That's what we use. There's another useful software called DB Browser for SQLite. DB Browser for SQLite. There's a feature called Download. I have a 64-bit Windows. I want the standard installer. I download it. It's now downloading. We don't recommend this for most people. But if you are a data manager, if you know Microsoft Access, if you know SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, just install this software here. And this will allow you to edit your WHONET files in WHONET, of course. But now when I go to my WHONET data folder, C drive, WHONET data, there's a file, this new icon here. I guess it didn't do it automatically. I might Adam, I'm not exactly sure where to find it, the software. Browse and choose
It'd
an
be
app
the
on your
last
PC.
one. Yeah.
And DB
Right there.
browser, good. And yeah, this last one here, good. Always good. So you see I changed the icon now, okay? So if I double click on this, WHONET doesn't open, but DB browser for SQLite opens. So if you're familiar with Access, here I can see the table. Here I can do SQL statements to do update, replace, search. So for people who love using databases like Access, SQL Server, MySQL, this will be a very nice thing for you. If you want to link this to other softwares, SQLite could be a good option. Besides that, I really don't recommend it for most of you. Almost everything you want to do, you can do with WHONET itself. I only mention this for the data managers on the call who would love to use this with Access. Unfortunately, Access cannot read an SQLite file directly. It can read an SQLite file through ODBC. So if you know how to do ODBC for SQLite, you can do it that way. I'm now going to go back to my PowerPoint, and I think we can finish up the PowerPoint and then get ready for questions. Okay. Right. So viewing and editing data. You can do this in the original Excel, in BacLink, in WHONET, or DB browser for advanced users. Prior to 2000, we used a structure called DBase or DBF, but it gets harder and harder to maintain. When I chose DBase back in 1994, it was already out of date then. 1994, I planned to use Microsoft Access, and Microsoft Access version 2, the only thing reliable about it is it would crash like once a day. So we could not choose Access because Access was not a reliable software at that time, which is why we got stuck with DBase. I made a mistake here. I should have said 2020, prior to 2020, not 2000. In 2020, we switched from DBase to SQLite. It's faster, smaller, more compatible, more security features, similar to Access and SQL Server. And from the Wikipedia article, according to, I don't know if this is true, but according to the developers, SQLite is the most widely database engine because it's used invisibly by cell phones, operating systems. It's used behind the scenes, so an end user often wouldn't see it, but it is there in the background. It's a file structure, not a software, but you can utilize DB browser to see and edit the files, and I already showed you how to do that. So summary, BacLink is a free software. It's part of the WHONET package. If you do not have an LIS, if you do not have an instrument, you do not need BacLink. I should have emphasized at the beginning of the call. If you have paper notebooks, use WHONET to manually type the data into WHONET. But if you do have a simple or a complex lab system, put the data into your system. And then once a week, once a month, once a year, or automatically, daily, weekly, or monthly, BacLink can take your data and put that into WHONET. I will stop sharing my screen, and it's 9 o'clock. For those of you who do stay, thank you.